Hey, this is the part two of the 5-5 worksheet. So the part one were these four problems and this proof. This part we'll be looking at proof number 6 and we'll be looking at 7. Proof 6 is really easier, I think, than proof 5. Now 6 says that ABCD is a parallelogram. So if ABCD is a parallelogram and AE, which is this piece right here, is congruent to CF, which is this piece right here, we have to prove that this segment, ED, right there, is congruent to BF right here. Now, if you don't see it already, these two triangles are going to be triangles that we're going to get congruent. Okay? So the first thing we want to do is mention that this side is congruent to this side because of opposite sides in a parallelogram congruent. Now, what makes this proof a little bit easier is that we can get these two triangles congruent by our side angle side, because this angle is congruent to this angle, because if the shape is a parallelogram, the opposite angles are congruent. Okay? So we have opposite sides. Okay, so I had to take a phone call, but yeah. So we're going to get the two triangles congruent, and then now we're going to get these two segments congruent by CPCTC. So it's really not too bad of a proof, so let's get it done. Number one, ABCD is a parallelogram. It's given. All right, let's go ahead and say that AD is congruent to CB. Okay, and that is if it's a parallelogram, opposite sides congruent. Okay, and then we can say that angle A is congruent to angle C, which is because if it's a parallelogram, opposite angles congruent. Number 4, okay, and we can say that AE and CF are congruent. That's given. AE congruent to CF. Looks like a P there, but it's an F. And that is given. Okay, so the triangles are congruent now. Triangle CFB is congruent to triangle, see I went from C to F to B, so I'm going to go AED, triangle AED, and that is side angle side. Okay, so the first side is 2, the angle is 3, and then the fourth side, or the fourth step, is the second side. Okay, so the last step would be the CPCTC step, which is ED congruent to BF. Okay, and that's CPCTC. So that proof wasn't too bad. All right, done. All right, the next proof is a little bit harder, so we'll take a look at that. That says that this is a parallelogram, so GHIJ, this big thing is a parallelogram, okay? And then HP, which is this segment here, is congruent to JQ, which is this segment here, okay? Now, this proof, these two things are not triangles. You see this figure right here and this figure right here, those aren't triangles, so we can't get those equal. So we have to go about this a little different. And that is what we're going to do with this one is, all right, well, I can see that these two triangles will probably be the triangles that I'm going to try to get congruent, all right? And I'm going to say that these two angles here are congruent by vertical angles. Now, these two sides are equal because the opposite sides in a parallelogram are congruent, okay? So that makes this side congruent to this side, which are part of the two triangles, congruent by subtraction, because we're going to subtract the two congruent parts. All right? Now, since this side and this side are also parallel, and this is my transversal, that makes this angle congruent to this angle, because if the lines are parallel, then the alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay? So that gives us these two triangles by angle, angle, side. And we want to prove that PX and QX are congruent, and they're going to be congruent by CP/CTC, QX and PX. All right? So that's how I'm going to go about doing this proof. There's another way to do it, but I'm going to take a look at tackling that. Okay? So here we go. I'm going to do this proof. So number one is GHIJ is a parallelogram, and that's given. Number two is that HP is congruent to JQ. That's given. All right. So now we've got to get these two triangles in here, these two red ones. So let's take care of the vertical angles. Okay. Let's do that first. That's an easy one. Angle PXG, angle PXG is congruent to angle QXI. And that is vertical angles are congruent. Now the fourth step, we have to say that the two segments GH and JI are parallel. So are congruent and parallel. So I'm going to do both. Watch. So GH congruent to IJ and GH parallel to IJ. Now, that is because if it's a parallelogram, opposite sides congruent and parallel. So, all right, now we can say a couple of things. We can get these two sides congruent by subtraction. So those two segments. So that is IQ is congruent to PG or GP. All right, and that is subtraction. We are working to get the triangles congruent. That is subtraction. All right, so now number 6. All right, we're going to say that angle PGX, all right, is congruent to angle QIX. Now that is if parallel, like we said that they were parallel. See, these two yellow segments are parallel. If parallel, the alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, so now I think the triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. So triangle, I'm just stealing the 3 letters here, PGX is congruent to triangle QIX. And that's angle, angle, side. Now the first angle, okay, was the vertical angles, which is step 3. Now the second angle is step 6, which were the alternate interior angles. And then the side was 5 we got by subtraction. Okay? All right, well that'll do it now because we can say that PX and QX are congruent by CPCTC. PX congruent to QX, and you can see they're up here too, PX, QX, and that is by CPCTC. Okay, so there's a lot going on there, right? So let me just review that. Again, I'll erase all this. We were given that this big guy here was a parallelogram. And then we recognized that these two triangles needed to get congruent. So we said the vertical angles. Now we needed another angle, and that was this angle right here. And this angle right here. Because these are congruent because of the parallel lines cut by the transversal. To see the alternate interior angles is important. Now, we were given that this segment was congruent to this segment, so we said that these two segments here were congruent by properties of a parallelogram, so we were able to get these two segments by subtraction. Then we proved the two triangles were congruent by angle, angle, side, so that made PX and QX congruent by CPCTC. All right? So the 3 proofs we have here are on this worksheet are done with these 2 videos. Okay? All right. Have a good day.